Today's lecture is on communicating designs orally and in writing. So after creating the design, the designer or the design engineer has to communicate the design to the other team members within the team as well as outside the team. So the within the team means outside the design team itself there are other teams that are working to convert this design into the final product, such as there are manufacturers and there are machinists who perform the machining operation, etc. And also to the final end customer, this design has to be communicated. So only after the customer sees and gets the design, he will be able to clearly identify how the design is, whether the design is as specified by the customer itself or whether there are any changes or further changes to be made in that existing design. So there has to be a communication, a two-way communication between the design team and the customer, as well as the design team also has to communicate with the other departments in the company. So there needs to be an efficient and an effective method for communicating the designs, and the two major mechanisms by which designs can be communicated is by orally, that is by speaking, and by writing. So let us see in detail how the designs can be communicated by using these two methodologies. Now, reporting actually comes under the stage where we have to report what has happened during the creation of that design. So, reporting is an essential part of a design project. The design team has to report the status of the design, whether it is in the ongoing stage or whether it is nearing completion or whether it has to be or whether it is finally completed. So that reporting has to be there, and the project is not completed if it is not communicated, if the work is not communicated to the client. So after the design has been completed, it has to be communicated with the client whether the work is completed or not. So after this is communicated with the client has to check the design whether the design is as per the specifications mentioned by him or not. If there are any changes, then the customer will be interacting with the design team to make the appropriate changes, and again this process will continue. Now the communication of final design can result in several ways. That is, communication can be done by making oral presentations or by preparing written reports and also by making models and prototypes. So these are the three different methods by which we can communicate the final design to the end customer. Either an oral presentation can be done or a written report can be given to the customer, or a prototype and a model can be shown to the customer. The primary purpose of communication is to inform the client about the design. And while doing the design, we mentioned that during the design phases, many alternative designs will also rise due to the different ideas of the design team. So for one particular problem, there may be many number of solutions. Similarly, for one particular product, there might be a large number of feasible alternate designs. But we cannot take up all these designs because finally we have to go with only one particular design. So what design will we choose? How and why this design was chosen over the other designs? That has to be mentioned to the customer in detail. It has to be very clear to the customer why those alternative designs were not considered and only one design was considered over the other designs. The reason has to be mentioned clearly. And the results of the design process also has to be communicated to the customer. Whether it was successful or whether the design team encountered any difficulty during the process or whether it was unsuccessful. So whatever the result is, it has to be properly communicated with the final customer. The clients are probably not interested in the history of the project. That means whatever things are being done by the design team, the clients or the customers might not be interested to hear that. So the design team might be doing a large number of activities. Some might be successful, some might not be successful, but the client is only interested in knowing the final outcome. He does not want to hear what all things has happened in between. All those things that has happened in between, that is for the design team to take it. The final customer or the end customer is not interested in hearing all those things. So the team should ensure that the final reports and presentations are not narratives or chronologies of the work. That means whatever work has been done, it has to be reported in a very concise or a very brief manner to the end customer. It should not be like a story. We have done this, then we have done this process, after that we have taken up this process. So it should not be like a story or a narrative. It should be very brief and the customer should be able to understand what are the important things that has happened, not the entire things. So these presentations should describe the design outcomes as well as the processes with which those outcomes were achieved. That means the presentations which are done by the design team to the end customer, it should mention about what the outcome of the design project was, whether they were able to achieve the design outcome, and also if they have achieved the required outcome, how were they able to achieve it, what was the process they used, whether it was successful or not, they have to mention it. So it has to be very brief so that the client or the end customer is not getting bored. He has to get the clear idea of what actually the design team has done. Now there are general guidelines for performing a technical communication. Technical communication means we have to specify the technicalities of the project. That means in engineering terms, what all things have been done that should be conveyed to the end customer. That is known as technical communication. Now there are certain basic elements of effective communication for writing of reports and giving oral presentations. And these are the 7 principles which are used in technical writing. So technical writing comes under technical communication. Technical writing means we have mentioned all the technical details about the design project. What all things have been mentioned technically for conducting the design project, that has to be there in technical writing, like the size, the dimensions, the engineering process, the manufacturing activities, all those things will be mentioned in technical writing. Now the 7 principles of technical writing are: first is know the purpose. So what is the purpose for which, or the objective for which the design project has been done? So initially, while creating a design, or for creating a design, there has to be a purpose, the objective. So that is known as the problem statement. So we have created a problem statement from the customer requirements. First of all, the customer will be giving his requirements, and we convert all these customer requirements into engineering terms, and that is known as problem statement. So we should have a knowledge about what is the purpose of creating that particular product, what is the reason for doing that design project. We should know that. Then knowing the audience. Knowing the audience means after or while doing the technical writing, we are creating a reports by technical writing. This technical writing can have a number of audiences. It can be a technical team, or it can be the managerial team, or it can be the worker level team, and it can be the designers. It can also be the end customers. So a large number of audience will be available for reading the technical reports. So for each of them, a separate technical report has to be prepared. If it is for a managerial audience, they are mostly interested with the timelines, the cost, the delivery times, etc. They are not much interested in the detailed technical aspects like technology used, the machinery used, machine cutting times. Such details are not necessary for the managerial audience. Whereas for a worker level or a supervisor level audience, they'll be more interested in technical aspects like what are the machine specifications, the process charts that are used, what are the different route maps followed by the work pieces. So such technical details will be of more interest to the supervisor or the worker level audience. Whereas the designers, they'll be mostly concerned with the design aspects, the size, the shape, dimensions, etc. And as far as a customer is concerned or the end customer is concerned, the customer will be more interested with knowing the final outcome. What is the functionality of the product, whether the product will function according to his requirements, whether the product is very comfortable to use, whether it is safe to use. So all those will be the concern of the end customer. So based on who your audience is, the technical writing has to be done accordingly. Then choose and organize the content around your purpose and your audience. So based on the purpose of the project and what is the audience for the report, the content for the technical writing has to be organized accordingly. Then write precisely and clearly. So it has to be, every point has to be mentioned very clearly and in brief. It should not be very long stories. Then design the pages well. So in technical writing, even in project reports, you might have seen that in reports there will be a definite order. So we have to follow that definite order and design the pages very clearly. It should have an introduction, it should have a description of the product, it should have the engineering descriptions, drawings, etc. And finally, there are certain conclusions for that design project. Everything should be there in an order. Then think visually. So think visually means while writing, doing the technical writing, the technical writer has to imagine how the report will be read by the different audience and what they will understand after reading this particular report. So that is the meaning of think visually. He has to imagine what the level of understanding for different audience will be. Write ethically. Write ethically means the technical writer or even the designer has to write the report in a very truthful manner. Even if there are certain situations where the outcome is a failure, the failure has to be mentioned clearly. It should not be suppressed. So such failures and unwanted circumstances that has been occurring during the design process should not be omitted. It should be clearly shown it should be clearly shown in the report also. So that is the meaning of ethical. Now let us look in detail what all these 7 principles are. So the first one is know your purpose. That is, we need to understand what is the purpose for which this report is or the presentation is made. So whether this report or this presentation is to inform about anything to the team, or whether this report or presentation is intended to give a brief outline of the progress report or the progress of the design team, or whether it is for giving a completion report. So we have to understand what is the main purpose of doing or writing that report or presentation. And there are various cases for which the design report or the documentation is prepared. The first one is to inform the client about the features of the selected design. So the client might have, or the client or the customer will have told about the requirements, and the design team will have noted all those requirements and they have made a documentation. So this documentation has to be informed to the client to understand whether the design team has correctly understood all the requirements of the customer. So the customer specifies the requirements, the design team writes down all those requirements and presents this to the customer himself. So the customer will understand that the design team has well understood all those requirements which he has told. Then the second case is that whether the design team, when the design team is trying to persuade a client that the design is the best alternative. So while doing the design process, the design team may come up across a lot of design alternatives or design solutions for a single problem. So which problem or the which solution has to be chosen, that has to be decided. So this has to be made clear to the end customer or the client that so many alternatives or so many solutions are available, and we can select this one particular alternative because it is the most suitable or the best solution to that problem. So that has to be made clear to the client. Then the third case is where a designer wishes to report how a design operates to users. That means after doing the design or completing the design, the designer will have to demonstrate how the design will work when the user is using that particular product. So these are the various cases for which the design documentation is done. Now the second principle is knowing the audience. What will be the audience for the particular presentation or the report? What is the technical level of the target audience? Whether the audience is highly technical or whether they do not have any technical knowledge, etc., has to be known before preparing the presentation or the writing. As I mentioned earlier, audience can be many types. They can be technical people or they can be managerial people, etc. So depending on what or who the audience is, we have to prepare the report or the presentation accordingly. Then understanding the target audience will help to ensure that the members will appreciate the documentation. So if we know who the target audience is, so we can prepare our presentation or we can write the report accordingly so that those who read the report or those who hear the presentation, they'll be able to understand it very clearly and it will be appreciated. The multiple documents and briefings on the same project for different audiences may be prepared sometimes. So as I mentioned earlier, there are multiple audiences. So multiple documents or reports or presentations have to be prepared for each audience. One presentation or one report which is suitable for one type of audience may not be suitable for another audience. So we may have to prepare, or the designers may have to prepare separate reports or separate presentations sometimes. And also we have to limit the concepts to a particular area of interest in the reports. So while writing reports, we cannot write everything in detail. So for one particular audience, we have to concentrate on writing the reports such that the particular audience has interest, or the area in which the particular audience has the interest has to be concentrated more. For example, if we are writing a technical presentation or a technical report, then the technical audience who are hearing or who are reading that report will be more interested in the technical details, the engineering details. So while preparing technical reports, we can limit the sections according to the area of interest of the audience. Since we have a multiple number of audience, the sections in those reports can be limited to their area of interest. Like for example, if the report is to be presented to the management side, the report should have more of management content and less of technical content. And if the report is to be presented or given to the technical persons or the technical audience, then it should have more of technical content and less of management aspects. So based on who our audience are, we should limit the area of interest in that report. So if we do like that, then the report will get a widespread, or will get a very widespread acceptance. So the third principle is choosing and organizing the content around your purpose and your audience. So now that we know what the purpose of the presentation or the report is and who our audience will be, and after knowing these two principles, we can organize the content to suit the needs of the audience. And if we are doing an oral presentation, the presentation should be structured so that it will have a good acceptance with the audience. So usually when we see a presentation, we see that each of the slides are well structured. There will be an introduction, there will be a description part, and there will be a conclusion part. And in between again there are a few slides which shows the working principles and etc. So there is a definite structure to be followed for each presentation. Then there are many different ways to organize information when we are doing a presentation. First is by going from general concepts to specific details. That means we start with a general topic or a general concept, and then we move towards more technical details. Then the second way is going from specific details to general concepts. That is the other way around. And the third method is describing devices or systems. So these are the different ways by which we can organize the information in a presentation. Then the design team should translate content pattern into a written outline. So after we decide on what is the pattern or what is the structure for the content to be made, then we prepare a written outline or the content that has to be presented to the audience. So this work is done by the design team. They should fill in the content and they should Make the content according to a definite outline. And please avoid needless repetition so that it will not be a boring presentation to the audience. So it is very much essential that we need to avoid certain words or certain phrases or certain areas which are repeated. Fourth principle is writing precisely and clearly. So it means while writing or preparing a technical report, it should be written to the point, and what has to be written or what is written in the report should be very much clear to the reader. So short paragraphs or short sentences can be used to write very precisely and clearly. Short and direct sentences that contain a subject and a verb. So it is very concise and it should convey all the ideas clearly. Then active voice and action verbs can be used, which allow a reader to understand directly what is being said or done. Opinions and viewpoints should be clearly identified. So all these things should be kept in mind while preparing a technical report. Designing the pages well. So if you look at any project reports, you can see that the project report has a well-defined structure. Well-defined structure in the sense all the pages are arranged according to a definite order, and in each of these pages, if you look at the headings, the subheadings, the paragraphs, etc., it will be following a regular pattern. The headings might be of a particular font size. Subheadings will have a slightly smaller font size, and the content will have again a normal regular size. There would be words which are underlined and some words which are highlighted in bold, etc. And avoid the use of long paragraphs, because short paragraphs and short sentences convey the meanings effectively. So a long section can be divided into several subsections. Then tables and figures can be used to convey information. Tables, if we are using tables in the report, it should be treated as a single figure and it should not extend over a page. That means it should be contained within a single page. And another important point is that if we plan the presentation well in advance, then we can make the presentation more effective and interesting to the audience. So careful planning of presentation support materials such as PowerPoint slides. If we can prepare the PowerPoint slides in a very good manner, it will enhance and it will improve the user hearing experience. Large fonts should be used because if presentation is being done in a very large hall, the people who are sitting at the back side or even at the end of the hall, they should be able to clearly see what is being presented. If the slides are not visible, then the audience will lose interest in the presentation and it will not be very effective. Simple and direct slides will encourage the audience to listen to the speaker. So if you are writing down or describing all the points as sentences in the PowerPoint slide, then the audience will have a tendency to look into the slide and read those sentences. So during this time, the audience will not be listening to the presenter. Instead, they will be busy reading what is being mentioned in the PowerPoint slide. So that such kind of presentations will be very ineffective, because the readers will not be, or the audience will not be listening to the speaker. So we should use very simple and direct slides to avoid this. The next principle is to think visually. Thinking visually means to make use of sketches and diagrams to convey information to the users. The involvement of graphics and other concepts such as work breakdown structures, etc., will help in planning the technical reports. Pictures, if we are using pictures, figures, graphs, etc., it will convey the information more effectively to the user. So rather than writing down long sentences, if it can be represented by a figure, then it will be more appropriate. Audiences are helped by good use of visual representation of information. So this information will be displayed as design tools, or it can be displayed as flowcharts or drawings, cartoons, etc. So all these are the different methods by which we can visually represent information. So graphs, flowcharts, etc., if we are using it, it will convey good information and meaningful information, and the user will be able to understand this information very quickly. Then the last principle of writing technical reports is to write ethically. That is because the designers, they try to suppress, some of the designers at least will try to suppress results which are not favorable to them. So if the design data or the design concept which they have built is not up to the mark, then that information will be hidden or will not be conveyed to any other parts or any other sections of the firm. That means either to the manufacturer or to the end user or to anyone. The designer will try to fix that issue on his own. So in cases where favorable results are not obtained, there is always a chance that such results will be hidden, or they will not be exposed to other people. So it will be suppressed, and such type of suppression or such type of hiding the unwanted data or unfavorable data, it should not happen. The designers should present all the facts fully and completely, and they should not hide anything. Such designers are called ethical designers. So ethical designers are those people who do not suppress data, unfavorable data. They reveal all the data, whether it is favorable or unfavorable. They will be revealing all this data and make it publicly available. All results or test outcomes are presented and discussed. And it is also important that if we are using the information which we get from others, then this information can be given full credit, or we can give full credit to the people who are the owners of this information, because we are using their information, the information that is gathered by another person or another people. So we can give credit to those people such as authors or previous researchers, and we can say that we are making use of the information from those sources. Now coming to oral presentations. Coming to the oral presentations. So oral presentations means they are the formal or informal presentations which are made to or which are presented to the clients, users, and it can be even presented to technical reviewers. So such presentations are made at different stages. First one is before starting the design work. So even before starting the design work, the design team will have a formal presentation, or they will be doing a formal presentation to the audience. That means the end user or the client. So such presentations will help in identifying the end users, and it will also ensure that all the requirements specified by the end users, they are correct or not. So suppose that when some of the requirements stated by the customer is not met by the design team, then during this particular phase, that is before starting the design work, when the design team does the presentation to the end user, the end user can identify, the end user will be able to identify that which are the requirements that are not covered or captured by the designers. So based on that, corrections can be told to the designers and the design team can work based on those corrections. Then the second phase when the presentations are made is during the project. So during the project working time, there will be interactions between the clients and the end users, the clients and the design team. So the interaction will be mainly dealing with what is the progress of the design work carried out by the design team, whether they are able to proceed correctly or whether they are facing certain issues. So all these things can be mentioned during the second phase. The third phase is after completion of the design alternative, where the design team again will be holding talks or meetings with the client or the end user, and they will be evaluating the different design alternatives that are available for a particular design. So the design team will try to convince the end user which the best design alternative is from a set of solutions, and they will decide on continuing with that selected solution. So this has to be made very clear to the end user that why the team is going to use such a design alternative and why the other alternatives were not considered. And finally, after everything is completed, it will, or they will announce the completion of the project. So oral presentations are made at each of these stages. Now, there are certain key elements which are common to all the presentations. The key elements are, first is to identify the audience. So as we mentioned earlier, what is the target audience, whether it is a managerial audience or whether it is a worker level audience or whether it is a middle level management audience. Such type of audiences can be identified. Second is to outline the presentation, to make the presentation in a very well structured manner, and to develop appropriate supporting materials which help in theoretical support for the presentation. And finally, to practice the presentation several times so that you can smoothly cover up the presentation. So to identify the audience before starting with the presentation, we should consider the factors to be considered with the audience, such as the audience will have varying levels of interest. Some might be very interested, some might not be very interested, and also the level of understanding that the audience has regarding the subject or the topic, the technical skill and the available time. So before starting with the presentations, all these factors need to be clearly analyzed. Most attendees are only interested in particular dimensions of the project. So managers will be very much interested only in the managerial aspect, whereas the worker level management will be, or the worker levels workers will be more interested in knowing the technical details. So the area of interest can be known by asking it to the meeting organizer. So there will be a person who will be organizing the meeting, and this person will be calling up the design team as well as the audience to listen to the presentation. So there will be a person who will be in charge of arranging the presentation, and the design team can ask the corresponding person about the area of interest, who all are attending the presentation and how many number of audience will be there, and then they can continue with the preparation for the presentation. After identifying, the team can again tailor its presentation. That means it can modify its presentation to suit that particular audience. So after they ask about the audience and get a clear idea, then it will be easier for the team to prepare the presentation. Presentation should be properly organized and it should be structured So a rough outline is prepared, and then using that rough outline, a detailed outline will be formulated. And again, for presentations we need to keep other presentation aids in a very proper working condition. Presentation should be clear, and the structure and organization of the presentation should be logical and understandable. Now there are different elements in a sample presentation. So if we consider a sample presentation outline, these are the different contents or the elements which should be there necessarily. First is the title slide. The title slide identifies or it gives information about the clients, the design team and the organization. So the title slide is the first slide where we mention in detail who the clients are, the name of the project, then the different members of the design team and for which organization it is prepared. Then the second slide is a roadmap for presentation. So roadmap for presentation will give you an idea of how the presentation has to be progressed or how it will proceed. Then description of the design requirement in engineering terms should be there, and that is known as problem statement. So whenever a customer gives certain requirements to the design team converts those requirements into problem statements. So problem statements are actually engineering based requirements. So the customer requirements are converted in engineering terms by means of problem statement. Then the fourth element is background material on the problem. So whenever a presentation has to be done on the problem, there should be some prior work or some supporting materials on prior work, the work that has been done earlier, then the research work that is being conducted right now, and what are the references that are used for the supporting materials. Supporting materials can be journals, it can be mirrors, etc. The key objectives of the clients and users should be made available in the slides. The key objectives means what is the purpose for making the design and what are the objectives that are met by the design, that should be included in that slide. Then constraints or limitations for the design should be mentioned, and then the functions that the design must perform, that has to be there, and the different design solutions or design alternatives that were considered during the later stages of design, that also should be mentioned. So these are the different elements of a sample presentation. Then certain elements which are not absolutely necessary, but if we are adding those elements it will be very good. Highlights of evaluation procedure and outlines, how the evaluation has been done and what is the outcome or what is the end result of evaluation procedure. So all those can be mentioned. The selected design, why the particular design has been selected from among a number of designs, that has to be mentioned. Features of the design has to be mentioned. and then whether any testing has been conducted, that is proof of concept testing has been conducted or not, and if a prototype is made, then a demonstration of the prototype should be there. Demonstrations can be in the form of photos, videos, etc. And finally, the presentation should conclude with the future work and suggested improvements in design. So these are the different elements of a sample presentation slide. Now, while doing oral presentations, we need to develop appropriate supporting materials. So this supporting materials are developed so that the design team will know the setting in which the presentation will be made. So before doing or preparing for the presentation, it is better that the presenter should be able to clearly know the setting in which or the background in which the presentation will be made. They should identify the devices or equipments that are available for doing the presentation. So suppose if we are going to do a presentation, then we should check the different lighting areas, then how the seating would be, the size and capacity of the hall, etc. Overhead projectors, computer connections and whiteboards, etc. are made use of in the section. For visual aids, like if you are using a PowerPoint slides, then we need to limit the number of slides by 1 or 2 per minute. So 1 or 2 slides per minute is the correct time period for which we can display the slides so that the audience will be able to gather as much information as possible. Self-introduction and introducing teammates on the title slide should be there. Who are the design team and what are their roles in the project should be mentioned. Avoid cluttering, which means the things should not be kept closer together so that it produces or it makes an awkward feel. So the letters, they should not be cluttered, they should be far apart, and all the points should be clear, direct and simple. The use of colors can be very helpful, but in certain areas it should be used very skillfully. Animations can also be used, and consider the size and distance of the audience while designing the PowerPoint slide. Practicing the presentations a number of times will improve the confidence of the design team, and they can deliver the presentation very well if they practice multiple number of times. So the practice can be done alone or in front of others, and always it should be kept in mind to use words and phrases that are very commonly used or that are natural to the speaker. Practicing is to be done under conditions close to the actual environment. So if we have an actual environment, it should be covered. The practicing of presentations can be done under conditions which are close to the actual environment. So for this, the design team or the presenter who is presenting the presentation, he can do the presentation in that large room itself or the conference room itself where the actual presentation is decided. So this will help in understanding the surroundings and the areas on which the presenter is very comfortable with. Decide in advance on handling questions in the end. So all the questions related to the presentation can be asked in the end, so that there won't be any interruption in between. And the design team should be prepared for questions from the audience by generating a possible list of questions. So whenever we are preparing for a presentation, we are preparing to do a presentation, it is always better to find out maximum number of questions from our end and trying to answer those questions. Supporting materials can be prepared like backup slides, using which we can gather more information, and always be prepared to say that you don't know or we have not considered that. So if the answer to a particular question is not known, then it is better to say that you don't know the answer rather than bluffing the answer. Then design review. What design review means? Design review is actually again a type of presentation which is considered to be a very long meeting. So during this meeting, the design team presents its design choices to an audience of technical professionals. So again, it is a very lengthy meeting where the design choices are explained in detail one by one to technical professionals who listen to the presentation, and for each of this audience, the meeting or the presentation has to be decided accordingly. Review is a full and complete exploration of the design. So a review will cover almost all the aspects of the design, and it should expose the implications of solving the design problem at hand. Then a design review will consist of briefing by the design team. They will brief on what are the different activities that they have conducted and what are the end results that they have obtained, and on the nature of the problem that is addressed. Extensive presentation of the proposed solution will be done after briefing by the team. So they will explain on what the proposed or the selected solution is and why they have selected such a solution. And design review is considered to be a best opportunity for the design team to get the complete attention of professionals about the design project, because design review has to be presented in front of a large audience, and this large audience will be a mix of all the types of works or workers that are currently working in that organization. So it will be a good chance to get a good feedback on the presentation and on the activities by the design team. Whether any changes has to be done in the design project, all these activities can be mentioned. All these activities can be mentioned during the design review. So the team members who are presenting the presentation, they will be asked to defend their design and answer certain questions which are directed towards the design. So that is about design review. Project report again is a document which is made towards the end of the project. The purpose is to communicate with the client his acceptance of design choices made by the team. So a project report is actually prepared only after the completion of the project and after the client or the user accepts the design choices. The clear presentation of the design problem analyzes the needs to be met, the alternatives which were considered, the basis on which decisions were made, and the decisions that were taken. The more detailed materials which cannot be included along with the main content, so they will be emailed, or highly detailed or technical materials that are not included in the main areas in the report, they will be included in the appendix or the appendices at the end of the report. So if you see a project report, you can see that there is a section known as appendix where certain details or tables, figures, etc. will be appearing. A report, again similar to the presentation, has a definite structure, and writing a report should be in a definite structure. The structured approach follows the following steps. That is, first one, determine the purpose and audience, construct a rough outline, review the outline within the team and with the team managers, and construct a topic sentence outline, distributing individual assignments and assembling, writing and editing it. The reviews of the initial draft from managers and advisors will be taken. Revise and rewrite the draft to respond to the reviews, and finally to prepare the final version of the report and presenting it to the client. So this is the general structured approach that is being followed in preparing a report. So you can see that these are the different contents of the structure. There will be an abstract which mentions in very brief what the report is about and what are the different activities and outcomes that is obtained from the report. Then there will be a summary, an executive summary, and the introduction and overview of the problem. Then the problem statement, which consists of engineering definitions. And then we have evaluation alternatives, design alternatives where certain different designs are available and we have to choose the best one among those design alternatives. And finally, we'll have certain supporting materials like drawings, cartoons, etc., which are held at or which will be kept along with the presentation.